Hello, it's John Heaton, and today I'm going to review this album from Badfinger, Ass, released in November '73 in the US and for some reason delayed, well for many reasons delayed till March '74 in the UK. This was the last album on the Apple label, and the picture depicts Badfinger as the donkey being tempted by a lot of money to leave Apple and go to Warner Brothers, which is the carrot. And I forget who did the artwork. Probably album sleeve designed by Peter Coriston and David Heffernan. And as it happened, it turned out pretty badly after they left Apple. They just released 2 more albums before Pete Ham took his life. Anyway, this is the follow-up to Straight Up, which came out in January '72, or maybe the last days of December '71 in the US. So quite a long gap, and so the first question to ask oneself is, why was there such a long gap? Because Straight Up was probably their most successful album commercially. It had big hit singles, Baby Blue and Day After Day, and I think what happened is Todd Rundgren was going to produce the follow-up, but he didn't get very far with that project, and only 2 tracks survived, which made it onto this album. The 2 tracks produced by Todd Rundgren. Otherwise, this album is produced by Chris Thomas, who would produce their 2 Warner Brothers albums as well. They did have a go at trying to produce the album themselves, and they submitted a rough cut of the album to Apple, and didn't go down very well. So, and they admitted that they weren't very good on the production side, and they tended to argue amongst each other. So to bring in Chris Thomas was a good thing. I have to say, the original version of this vinyl, when I got it, I was listening to it and thinking the production's a bit muddy, and they've cleaned it up quite nicely on the CD remasters. But the original album it's a noticeable contrast to the sharp, clean, crisp production of Straight Up, and not comparing very favourably in comparison. What else can we say? The Badfinger name keeps changing. They obviously couldn't make up their mind, because I think it's different on every album. I'm pretty sure I don't remember it being the same on any 2 albums. So that's probably didn't help with their identity. This is quite a heavy album. It's probably their heaviest rock contained here. This is the donkey again with the carrots. This is a US copy on Apple, and it's in pretty good nick. Bit of a scratch on side 2 there. I don't believe I've ever seen a UK copy of this album. I think it's considerably rarer. This album wasn't too hard to find, I seem to remember, compared to Straight Up and No Dice, which were a lot harder to lay one's hands on. So, one of the delays of why this album came out late, is because they couldn't agree on the songwriting credits, because Joey Molland was not subject to the same Apple contract that the rest of the band had signed, and because he features so heavily on this album, their manager Stan Polly advised Joey not to sign any contract with Apple to that effect. So he held out. He obliged, and these tracks ended up all being credited to the whole band, Badfinger. But on the CD you can see who writes each track, and indeed it's pretty easy to tell, because whoever sung the lead vocal wrote the track. Just going to put the record in the shade here. So, opens with Apple of My Eye from Pete Ham, and this was Pete Ham's farewell to Apple, which Apple was so impressed with they released it as a single. Fortunately, didn't do very well, but it's a very heartfelt song. I'm sorry, but it's time to move away. Inside my heart, I really want to stay. Not many bands would actually write a song about the record label they're about to leave, but obviously the Apple years had been good to Badfinger on the whole. They'd launched them as a band, and a couple of them were lucky enough to play on the Imagine album, and all four of them played on Concert for Bangladesh. And George obviously featured, and Paul helped out occasionally at the beginning. So happy times, and a sad song, a farewell, heartfelt song to Apple. Then Joey is his first number, that was from Pete, and then Joey has 5 out of 10 numbers on this album, which makes me think that, well, he was in a pretty lucrative period in terms of having lots of songs coming out of him. But also it tells me that Pete Ham and Tom Evans may have been suffering a little bit of the opposite, or maybe they lack the confidence to present their songs to the rest of the band. I don't know, because I've heard some Pete Ham demos on those albums which came out a few years ago, 7 Park Avenue and Golders Green. There's some great stuff which never made it into the studio, so I don't really think Pete had run out of songs, but I have to say, he's only got 2 songs on this album, and Tom has only got 2 as well. So Joey has 5 and Mike has 1. So Joey's first song, a piano-driven ballad, Get Away. You may be right, working all night and day, but sometimes I feel I've got to get away. This was a lyric aimed at Pete Ham, because Pete Ham used to record day and night, and Joey just had to get out of the house. They all lived in the same house in just off the Finchley Road, Park Avenue. Quite cramped conditions for 4 of them to live with their girlfriends and stuff. So this is a great rocker from Joey, and then he actually sings the next song, Icicles, as well, and nice guitar work and a nice track. Not perhaps outstanding, but pretty pleasing to listen to. The winner is a leftover from the Todd Rundgren project, Following Straight Up, and some lyrics aimed apparently at John Lennon, who was complaining a bit too much in public, and Joey objected to this a bit, but there's nothing terribly vindictive in the lyric, and again a good rocking band sound. Blind Owl from Tom, one of his best Badfinger tracks, and I used to do this number live, not surprisingly, because it's really good jamming at the end, and great vocal from Tom, great bass. Just overall, the band have got this one licked, and as I say, a good live number. And then side 2 opens with another Joey Molland song, Constitution, a heavy song, this one, quite reminiscent of Jimi Hendrix, and maybe the chord progression is familiar. I can't quite place where it's from, but it's fairly generic, so whatever happened, he got away with it. Nice lyrics about, kind of along the lines of I could cause problems and kick up a stink, but it's not my constitution, it's not my way of life. I'm just a lover for my wife, and my life, in another verse. Nice song from Joey, and great guitar from Pete on this track. And when they did it live, Pete always used to let go on this track. By the way, this is the band shot on the back cover from the time of this album. And When I Say is Tom's heartfelt ballad to Marianne. They got married this year in 1973, and it's a gorgeous ballad and a gorgeous guitar solo, and one of Tom's very best tracks ever. Talking of which, the next track is probably my favourite Mike Gibbons track of all time. I think it's a glorious track, Cowboy. Play this one loud, and some amusing lyrics about, hey soldier, it's up to you to make it home today. And I know you well enough to say yeah. I love it. And it's kind of country and western feel to this, and nice guitar solo in the middle, and one of Badfinger's very best tracks. And then the next track is Joey's last song, his 5th song from the album, I Can Love You, which is produced by Todd Rundgren. And it's kind of a moody rocker, and it's okay, it's not outstanding, but yeah, it's decent. And then the album closes with perhaps the best track on the album, Timeless, which is just Pete Ham at his very best. Philosophical lyric, not that, sophisticated lyrically, but the way it builds up from the flute and the guitar at the beginning, and then the piano comes in and the drums, and then the bridge gets heavier, and then there's 2 guitar solos, and I think I'm right in saying Joey plays the first, and then in the fade out, the extended fade out, Pete is playing lead. I think I'm right in saying, and that fade out at the end, this white noise is noticeable and very reminiscent of I Want You, She's So Heavy from the Beatles' Abbey Road album. So a very strong closer, and I was playing this album to my sons recently, and they were both really impressed with this track. So I think this album is underrated, and it's one of the most enjoyable. Well, they're all enjoyable, all worth checking out, and all have their highlights. But this one doesn't quite get talked about as much as the earlier Apple albums for some reason. I think it's not far behind. I think it's pretty decent. And thank you for watching. See you next time.